Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark.
Cemetery Stories, Volume 5, Story Number 1. As far as I know, the creature has never tried harming me, but it has oftentimes made me feel unsafe and threatened. As the years have passed, I've begun paying less mind to it and just putting the feeling in the back of my mind. Let's go back to January 2012. I bought a horse and began boarding it at a very old barn. It was a small, tight-knit, friendly barn community not far from my home. It had been around since the 60s, surrounded by woods. There were three barns: the main arena, which was entirely surrounded by thick woods, and then there were these small trails in the woods behind the property. Fast forward to June 2012. 6 months have gone by, and I had two horses there now. I was there every single day without fail, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. I fed the horses and cared for them. I rode one every night as well, mainly in the arena, but sometimes in the barnyard. There were no field or arena lights, just the moon and stars. One evening, around 5 p.m., I was sitting on her, letting her stand, when she started snorting and backing up. I looked up and saw this white-gray creature crawling out of the woods towards us. It had a very small round head. Its eyes were just pits. It had a very small mouth, not much detail there. Its arms were very long and thin, fingers also like that. Its rib cage was very pronounced and defined, and its legs were long and lanky. Its movements were very jerky, not smooth and fluid. It slowly jerked out to us, when my horse turned and bolted out of the arena. She's a dead broke, calm, well-mannered horse who never spooked before this. Stubborn old mare, but not spooky. She would not go back into the arena that night. I walked around the barnyard, stayed near the main barn, put her up, and ran out to peek into the arena, to find nothing except some footprints where I saw the thing. Throughout the summer I saw it peeking, almost dancing, around the gate that led into the woods where the trails were. One night, roughly a month later, at about 9 p.m., I was riding that horse again in a front pasture. The moon was full and bright, and I looked to my left to see the creature running full speed by my side on the other side of the fence. I slowed my horse to a stop, and it took off round the corner and behind the side barn into the woods. I continued seeing it mainly in the woods, but it was always around. Summer of 2013, the barn shut down when the owner died. We moved the horses to a friend's place for the time being, and I didn't see it there. Then in the summer and fall of 2013, I found a new barn, woods directly behind the barn and arena. This place had lights and was much newer. About a month later, when I was getting ready to leave, I heard something in the woods. I looked down the barn aisle into the woods and saw the creature running down the road into the woods. I saw it much less frequently for a while, until later in the fall of 2014, I began seeing it in the back pasture woods. It darted in and out of the tree line. I saw a second one sitting in a neighbor's yard. It would sit in the same spot every day and watch me ride. Started taking pictures, which were very poor and crappy, and sent them to a friend who claimed he and some others had seen it. Kept seeing it occasionally, but from a much greater distance than at the first barn. I went with this barn owner to another farm to get some stuff when I saw a very, very larger version of this creature run out from the woods, right behind a tree I was 10 feet from, while I was alone by the trailer. Last November, I house sat for the barn owners. I went out around 2 a.m. to fill water troughs and enjoy the full moon and the cool night. I was sitting in the back pasture when three of the creatures began coming from the woods. One came up to the trees near the trough where I was. The other two were walking along the tree line. The horses were silently munching their hay pretty far from where the creatures were. I messaged the guy from earlier and told them what was going on. Since that incident, I haven't really seen them. Last summer, I did see one outside my house, staring into the windows. A few weeks ago, one was outside my bedroom window, tapping and making a strange, faint shrieking sound. It isn't unusual at all for me to go long periods of time without seeing these creatures, but through all of 2017, I haven't seen it or any of them, and that's the longest I've ever gone without seeing it. I still felt like I was being watched when I'm outside at night, sometimes when I know I'm alone. What I find odd though is last year from August to December, I was frequently at a friend's house. She lived very close to an abandoned church camp ground place with a cemetery. We walked through the woods at 2 a.m. to it and explored all the buildings. I went during the day, drove to it daytime and nighttime. The one thing no one would let me do is go into the cemetery, and it's my one regret. I wanted to go to it so badly. It had a strong, creepy vibe, and I'm incredibly surprised I never saw my creature out there. I took a 40-hour bus ride up the East Coast last summer, and that's when I stopped seeing it so frequently. If I remember correctly, I began seeing it at the first barn. I visited there shortly before that trip. I assumed the creature began following me from there, but I'm not 100% sure, as I have lived in a very haunted place before. So, you'd think me going back there yet again would have brought it even closer to me? I didn't even see it when I was all alone at the old abandoned barn. I've seen it at night once at my current barn. It looked at me for a moment before darting off into the empty dark pasture. I saw it once, last fall midday outside a window, and that was the last I've seen it. Part of me is a little sad I'm not seeing it, but more than anything, I find it very strange. With all that said, I've had other paranormal experiences. My earliest story that I can recall is from when I was 9 or 10. I had a friend over and we were playing in my backyard. It was midsummer in the evening, so it was starting to cool off, but the sun was still up. We were running back and forth between all of my grandfather's various project cars in the back corner of the yard. We were heading to the corner furthest from the house when I saw a large, pitch-black shadow figure of a man between our woodpile and the fence line. My grandfather was in his first built workshop closest to the house, far from where we were. My friend started inching closer to it while I ran away. I called to her when I realized she was trying to go to it, and she snapped out of it and came back to me. For many years, we would both talk about it, but in the more recent years, she refuses to acknowledge it at all. Not sure if it could be related, but in 2015, I found one of my ducks in that very corner with her neck mangled apart. Next story. This happened about 14 years ago. My boyfriend and I went to a graveyard one night because he had told me a story about how he had seen something there. He didn't really want to take me, but I insisted. He said that he had heard stories about the place, and if you go there and sit every night, you'd eventually see it. He said he had finally seen the thing himself on the third or fourth consecutive night he visited. And it was a man-like and gray, but he had only caught a glimpse of it and never went back afterward. I remember him saying he had car trouble when it appeared also. Well, I couldn't resist. I wanted to see for myself. On the third night we saw it. We were sitting in the dark with the moon being the only source of light. Man, we were dumb. And we both suddenly got creeped out for the first time since we had been visiting the place. We changed our minds about the whole thing and decided to leave and never come back. But lo and behold, the car, my car that has never had any trouble before, and not again for years after this incident, wouldn't start. My boyfriend was driving that night and kept trying, and it did eventually start up. When the headlight came on full force, we saw it standing right in front of the car. It was about 7 feet tall and it was gray. In fact, it looked like a moving statue to me. It was kind of bent over, just looking into the windshield at us, and we were freaking the hell out. Finally, it kind of shifted and the car started. The thing darted off to the left so quick, I knew that if it came to the side windows, we'd both be dead within a minute. It was so fast. But it just stood to the side of the car watching us as we drove away. The cemetery was laid out with a gravel road. This is an old country cemetery. Went around the whole graveyard in a circle and looped back around. So the entrance is also the exit. We were spinning tires and slinging gravel the whole way around. But when we passed the place where the thing was, it hadn't moved. It had been standing there watching us go around the gravel circle, and it let us leave. but it was looking directly at me. The passenger side of the car was facing it, and I couldn't really make out any features because it was dark, but I was overcome with the most severe depression I've ever felt in my life in that moment when I was looking back at the thing. It was like everyone and everything I cared about in my whole life was burned right before my eyes. The pain and the hurt was almost tangible, and it took my breath away in that moment. That night, when I was home and finally able to somehow sleep, I had a dream that the thing was calling to me from the graveyard, begging me to come back. It was harmless and miserable, stuck in that old cemetery forever, and it was alone, so alone. When I woke up, I was determined to go back to find the creature, but before I could even tell my boyfriend, I got calls from him and two of my best friend. All three of them had nightmares where the thing had brutally murdered and mutilated me. The two girls who called me didn't know anything about the graveyard incident the night before. It was so late when I got back home, I didn't tell anyone about it. Just went to bed. My boyfriend dreamt that I had gone back to the place because I felt bad for it, so he drove out there after me. When he got there, he found the thing ripping me apart, tearing me open. For a long time, I had dreams about it saying, "I won't hurt you. Please come back and help me. I am suffering." And for a while, I had to fight the urge to go back, even after three people told me about their nightmares where I died. The pull isn't strong at all anymore. I guess it faded with time and kids and adults. But I do think about it often. And I do kind of get a little itch just to drive through, and I don't know. It would be dumb as hell, but there's always been a little nagging voice that whispers about the thing we saw that night. It had a masculine physique, but no genitalia, and its eyes were completely black. No iris or pupil or anything, just black, inky nothingness. I've been searching all these years, but the only pigs I've seen that look even remotely like it are wendigos, but not the ones with fur or antlers, just a grayish humanoid sexless thing. The best way I could describe it actually is, it looked like a statue to me. But then, that wouldn't be possible. Next story. This all happened a few months ago. My friend had heard that the northern lights might be visible on our area and asked if I wanted to go for a drive out into the country to see if we could catch a glimpse. So we headed out after dark and drove for a while, putting the city behind us and winding out into the countryside, all while scanning the skies and just searching for a good vantage point where the stars and the lights might be visible. But several hours passed, and with nothing to show for our efforts, we started to give up on seeing the lights altogether. As we discussed what to do next at that point, my friend noted that we were close to her hometown and reminded me that she had been wanting to visit the local cemetery to find the graves of some of her distant relatives. She had recently been researching her genealogy. It was a clear, warm night, and we were both pretty disappointed that we hadn't seen the lights. We both wanted to make the trip worthwhile, so we agreed to swing by the cemetery. We pulled into the dirt road adjacent to the cemetery and walked around until we found the right graves. She took some photos, and we decided to just wander around for a little while. My friend was leading the way, using the flashlight on her phone to light the path and to ensure that we didn't accidentally step on any of the graves. I had been feeling increasingly anxious since we arrived, which struck me as just a bit odd. I have done several cemetery projects as an archaeologist and don't normally feel nervous in cemeteries, even at night. In fact, I usually find that cemeteries are pretty peaceful and calming. But I felt really strange in that particular graveyard and found myself frequently spinning around because I felt like someone was standing behind me. Still, I just chalked it up to general anxiety and tried not to dwell on it. One of the problems with having an anxiety disorder is that it's sometimes hard to tell when your nervousness is justified, even in retrospect. I don't know if my anxiety was just in my head or if it was related to what would happen next. After wandering for a while, we realized that it was approaching 1 a.m. and that we should probably get back home. We turned back and headed towards the car. My friend's car was in sight, and she was just a few yards ahead of me when it happened. I suddenly got a wave of that nervous feeling again and thought that I heard someone running up behind me. I was starting to turn my head to look back when I felt something collide with my back, the initial impact hitting me right between my shoulder blades. There was a substantial weight behind it, as if someone had actually hurtled into me. The impact was so forceful that I was thrown forward and fell flat on my face, and as I scrambled to get back up, I felt the weight pressing into my shoulders again and was shoved back down. I then glanced up to see my friend running toward me. She had also heard someone running up to us, had heard my initial fall, and had turned just in time to see me being pushed back down. She would later tell me that she had seen my sweatshirt flattening against my back and shifting, as if someone had been pressing their hands against my shoulders. She grabbed my arm to pull me up just as the weight disappeared, and we both bolted to the car, jumping in and instinctively locking the doors. She wasted no time starting the engine and then hastily peeled out of the driveway. As soon as we hit the main road, we just sped away from there as quickly as possible. We drove for several minutes without saying a word. I think we were both stunned and, more than anything, confused. She finally glanced at me and said, "What the hell just happened?" I didn't know quite how to answer that. I told her that someone had shoved me to the ground, and she said, "I know, I saw. But what was that? There was nothing there." We tried to come up with a rational explanation, but none of them made any sense. Had someone ambushed me and then bolted? Definitely not. We would have seen them. Had I tripped? No. I definitely felt something pushing me, and my friend had seen me being shoved back down. Had it been the wind? Not possible. There hadn't been so much as a breeze that night, and if there had been some freak gust of wind, it would have hit my friend too. Perhaps an animal had attacked me, but that didn't seem possible either. There were no local animals large enough, strong enough, and stealthy enough to topple a full-grown human without being seen. Had I been in full view of my friend, illuminated by her flashlight, during the second fall, and the weight had remained at my shoulders even as she was coming up to me, she should have been able to see whatever had been pushing me. If nothing else, an animal would have cast visible shadows beneath the glare of her flashlight. But there was nothing. We just couldn't explain it. Whatever had pushed me twice, it hadn't been visible to us. As the adrenaline faded, I noticed something else. My back hurt. Right between my shoulder blades, right where I'd felt the impact, I could feel a sort of stinging, prickly sensation. I felt like my back, despite being covered by my sweatshirt, had somehow been brushed with stinging nettles. I mentioned this to my friend, and she insisted on pulling over to the side of the road to look at my back. She switched the hood light on in the car and pulled the collar of my hoodie down to look. I heard her say, "What? What is this?" She took a photo of my back and showed it to me. The skin between my shoulder blades was reddened, and several little blisters had started to appear. In the days that followed, the blisters would later swell up and pop. It was as if somehow someone had gotten a sunburn or a bad chemical burn. There weren't any scratches or cuts. There were no open wounds, no blood. It was a relatively subtle mark, but it was still clearly there, and it baffled us. We certainly couldn't figure out how I'd gotten burned. I hadn't rubbed up against anything. I hadn't touched my back. I'd been wearing my hoodie all night, and there were no tears or marks in the fabric. And the burn hurt. It continued to sting for several days. I couldn't sleep that night. My back hurt, and every time I started to drift off, I'd suddenly begin to fear that someone was standing over my shoulder, and I would startle awake. I couldn't really understand what had happened at the cemetery, but it truly rattled me. I don't exactly know where I stand on the issue of paranormal phenomena, to be honest. As an anthropologist, I'm trained to keep an open mind, but I still have to rely on a deeply academic and often empirical perspective. Still, I know that something truly bizarre and frightening happened that night, and my inability to explain it, to account for every strange little detail, has been deeply disturbing. It's also been especially difficult to grapple with this because I already have PTSD from a previous assault, and there is something profoundly unsettling about the fact that, in this instance, there is nothing I could have done to defend myself. And with no clear explanation for it, there is no way for me to prevent something like this from happening again. I cannot cope with a fear that I cannot even begin to understand. It has also begun to affect my dreams. I've had several odd nightmares since the incident in the cemetery, dreams that are oddly similar to the nightmares that I'd had for years when I was growing up. I don't know where they come from, but as long as I can remember, I've had dreams in which a creature is attempting to lure me in one way or another, and in the dreams, I usually understand this creature to be a devil or a demon. Simply put, something evil, something dangerous, and like the entity in the graveyard, difficult to understand. These dreams have become suddenly relevant again, as I seem to have them nearly every time I fall asleep these days. I know that, likely due to trauma, hopefully not due to anything more sinister, these dreams and the experience in the graveyard are somehow linked. Sometimes the menacing creature in my dreams takes the form of an old woman. I had one dream when I was about 13 years old, in which I was wandering through a forest. I came across a little cottage with this old woman standing by the porch. She beckoned me inside and I agreed. We spent some time casually talking and baking cookies, but I felt uneasy around her and got the sense that she wanted something from me. We stayed only in the kitchen throughout the dream, but I can recall glancing at the doorway to other rooms and seeing nothing but shadowy edges. I thought that perhaps I should try to leave, but couldn't remember how to find my way out. At one point, as we sat at the kitchen table, I glanced out the window and noticed a group of people standing in the yard, calling out to the old woman. I asked who these people were, and she told me, "They want me to take them in, but I don't want them. I want you." In other dreams, it had a more sinister appearance, but I always recognize it as the same creature. I sometimes have dreams in which it is sitting in the dark at my bedside, whispering to me. It has a shadowy appearance with long, lanky limbs and empty eye sockets. Its teeth are made of razor wire, and there is something like blood or wine gleaming on its lips. In those dreams, I can hear it whispering but can't understand what it's saying. Sometimes I have dreams of the same creature sitting in a chair in the corner of my room, eating what seems to be a rotten apple. I've long suspected that this creature is a manifestation of my deepest and most troubling fears. I know these are just dreams, but I mention it because those dreams have subsided in my early 20s, but the incident at the cemetery rattled me so much that they've returned. It seems to have shaken my understanding of the world around me, opening the floodgates to my own inner demons. In these new dreams, that creature standing upright behind me at the cemetery. Time seems to be slowing down. I can sense my friend frozen ahead of me and the creatures whispering at my back. I don't really know why my mind is conflating that dream creature with my encounter at the cemetery, but the fear has increasingly kept me up at night. I have no idea what happened that night. My friend believes it was a ghost, but I just don't know. I've never personally experienced anything like this. I really don't know what to do with it. Next story. I'm 25 years old and I've lived my entire life until this point as an atheist. I did not believe in God and absolutely nothing paranormal. I was always skeptical of believers and was certain they were just exaggerating simple stories or fabricating them entirely. I could never even sit through a single episode of a ghost hunting show because I just knew they were lying and faking evidence for the TV. Fast forward to the present time. Not long ago, my mother came up to visit and for a while had wanted to photograph a very old cemetery in my town. She does photography on the side and thought it would be cool. We finally decided to do so because I had free time and the weather was nice out. We loaded up the equipment and rode over to the cemetery. We took several photos all over the cemetery and did a lot of sightseeing of the old headstones. A lot of them are from the late 1800s. We came across an incredibly unique tombstone, later found to be a family plot marker. An extremely tall and aged marble color, and it had a huge oval-like opening in the middle of it. We decided to take some pictures behind the opening of that tombstone. We set up the tripod and both got behind it, took a few pictures via the remote, and had a couple of laughs. She is my best friend, and we stayed laughing generally at inside jokes and being in the mere company of each other. I told her it was getting late, so we should probably stop and get loaded back up and head back to the house. She agreed, and we walked away from the marble tombstone to grab the equipment just a few feet away. As we began walking away, my mom, just a few feet ahead of me, and I'm following directly behind her, and I suddenly feel a heavy and abrupt weight on my back. Something actually hit my back. I can only compare it to perhaps someone slapping your upper back with a surfboard or a huge plank of wood. It knocked the wind out of me and I whelped, quickly freaking out trying to process what was happening. I immediately noticed my mom was freaking out too. I was assumed she saw whatever hit my upper back, but then I noticed she's yelling words. "Get it off! What is on my back? Oh my God, something is on me." It dawns on me she's feeling exactly what I felt. I started yelling back, trying to tell her that nothing is on her and to calm down. I started frantically explaining the physical attack I had just felt, that we apparently both felt. We were both very visibly shocked and confused. There were no trees above us in the area we were standing, and there was nothing on the ground around us that would have indicated something thrown. We were also the only ones at the cemetery at that time. My mom had a mark on her left shoulder a couple of days later. I'm still trying to find a way to process this, as I've never been a believer. I now do without question. However, I have tons of different questions. Why did this happen to us? What was so powerful to launch such a physical attack on two human beings at the same time? Again, just why? This has opened a whole new world to me. It brings up curiosity for the afterlife and death in general. I dug and did some research to see if anyone had ever investigated Laurelwood Cemetery, where this happened to us. Much to my surprise, a family paranormal team has an investigation that they did back in 2012. I tracked down their page and reached out via Messenger. I told them about our incident and asked for more information on their investigation. The dad answered and told me he wasn't surprised, as it was one of the most active cemeteries he had ever been to. He also sent me some footage that they had gotten and amazing evidence. But even though with what they've told me, I still am no closer to actually explaining what happened to us. And that's pretty hard for somebody that doesn't even believe in God, much less the afterlife or in ghosts. Next story. These are some of the stories of what occurred to me as a night watchman at a very old historic cemetery. I worked a 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. shift. The cemetery generally closed at 6 p.m., so around 5:30 p.m. I would lock the main gate, then would start driving through the cemetery to notify any visitors that we would be closing soon. I'd instruct them to park in a line in front of the locked main gate, and when my drive-through the grounds was complete, I would unlock the main gate. Everyone would leave, and I would lock the gate behind them. So one day, I'm in the middle of my final drive-through and see an old lady slowly walking the sidewalk alongside a mausoleum. The mausoleum was hundreds of feet long, about 20 feet tall, and had no breaks in it. It was one long stretch. The road ran directly alongside the sidewalk of the mausoleum, so I pulled up behind the lady to tell her we were closing. I got out of my car, took my eyes off of her for a split second as I'm getting out of the car, and when I shut the door and look up, she's gone. Completely vanished. I didn't think anything paranormal at first. I just thought maybe I lost sight of her. But the sidewalk and road were completely empty. I ran all the way around to check the back of the mausoleum, but no one was there. Across from the mausoleum was a whole field of graves, and I eagle-eyed every row, not a soul in sight. I finished up my round and sat in my car the rest of the night in a well-lit area. I saw a fully visible person. I know it. No tricks of light, no hallucination, plain as day. This encounter seemed to break open the proverbial dam, because after this, I had numerous unexplainable occurrences. Well, these are another stories. Normally, my then girlfriend, now my wife, would drop by around 8 p.m. and bring me dinner. I couldn't really leave. I never told her about my experiences because I didn't want to freak her out. As I'm walking her back to her car to leave, I see her reach back and touch her ponytail, then look around with a look on her face. I ask her, "What's wrong?" And she says, "Nothing. I must have gotten my ponytail caught in a tree branch. I felt something." So I pointed out to her that the closest tree was 20 feet away and that it was impossible. Then she got really pale and said it felt like someone ran their hand through her hair, front to back, and then pulled on the ponytail. We were both pretty freaked out, and she left. She never came and brought me dinner again. Now, I was originally hired because the cemetery had a period of time where they experienced some grave robbers and people breaking in to perform satanic rituals. I was 21 years old, doing this as a side job with no gun, no weapon, or anything like that. I was given a barcode scanner and was told to drive through the entire cemetery every hour or so to patrol and to scan each of the pre-posted barcodes to prove I was actually doing it. Now, this cemetery was massive, pretty much broken into three parts: the neo part, the historic part, and the famous part where celebrities and other famous people are buried. I did this routine once and never did it again. going so far as to break the damn barcode scanner, so I didn't have to do it. While I was driving, it was pitch black. Coming around the long curved road, my headlights pick up what I could have sworn were a pair of legs walking across the path, but only up to the knees. Shoes, pants, knees, then absolutely nothing. I stopped dead in the road and just watched this pair of legs with no body cross the road 10 feet in front of me. I put the car in reverse, did what felt like the longest K-turn of my life, and noped it straight back to the parking lot. Other quick things with less experience was hearing strange noises and seeing floating lights in the cemetery after I knew for sure everyone was gone. Weird animal sounds that I couldn't recognize. There was another incident that involved a co-worker. This is a guy who works a day shift, which is 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. He was a grimy dude. We'll call him Bart. Part of our job was to go around the cemetery and check the graves for personal effects left by family members and remove them. Many people leave things like toys for children who had passed away, birthday cards, mementos, etc. I personally hated this policy and refused to enforce it. Who was I to take a dead child's toy, fire engine, and throw it away? But Bart had the habit of scouring the cemetery for things he deemed valuable and would take them home. Instead of throwing them away or bringing them to the office to be picked up by the family. In the short time I worked there, Bart's mental state deteriorated. He started spending hours there, even after his shift was over, walking around the cemetery and drinking heavily. He seemed detached and even more out there than when I first met him. Eventually, when I didn't see him for a week or so, I asked about him, and my boss said he just no called, no showed, and never heard from him again. I often wondered if he developed some type of attachment from bringing so many objects home he shouldn't have. Then, once Bart stopped showing up, I picked up his Saturday morning shift. It was a quiet day, so I pulled my car around the back of the old chapel to take a nap. The chapel was surrounded by 12-foot high hedges, so I figured it was a good spot to park for an hour and shut my eyes. I fell asleep and woke up to see my car completely surrounded by dead people. So real, so vivid, so much detail. They were all pressed up against the glass and windshield. They had on the outfits they were buried in, suits, dresses, but all dirty and in different stages of decomposition. No one spoke, no one moved, they all just stared like I was some zoo exhibit. Then I woke up. I'd been asleep and it was a dream. The thing is, it felt so real. I've never had a dream so real, so vivid before or after. I took it as a message. I called my boss and quit as soon as I left at 4 p.m. I go back to that cemetery from time to time because I have 3 grandparents and an aunt buried there. I never linger too long though, and always make sure I'm out long before it gets dark. Wouldn't you? Next story. This story is about my co-worker. He was a watchman and was part of the grave digging crew. The cemetery he worked for was situated on a hill and had a thick patch of woods. One day he was in the watchtower and noticed a small figure emerge from the trees. She was dressed in a thick wool cloak and quickly moved across the cemetery. He was high up, but not so high that he couldn't see that this was an old woman. She seemed to have vanished when she looked up at him scowling. It turns out his co-workers all told him they saw her frequently and referred to her as the Witch of the Woods. Another story he told me how couples would break in late at night and head towards the mausoleum to have sex. He and his co-workers would radio to each other, then meet up and decide who or how all of them were going to scare these people. And the best one, as my co-worker described it, was when he and a friend hid in different parts of this huge mausoleum in a pretty secluded area of the cemetery. The other 2 hid outside and would get these people for a second round of scares. These people were ripping their clothes off when they stumbled in, so my co-worker made a zombie moan, and his friend followed. Then they rose out from behind one of the walls, and these people lost their shit. My co-worker couldn't breathe because him and his co-workers were laughing so hard. Well, the couple came back in and told them it's sick that they would scare people. They all said, and you're trespassing to have sex in a mausoleum.